In the 2-year period from 1942 to 1944, Germany produced 1,347 Tiger I tanks. Now, while the Tiger I was an outstanding design for its time, it suffered from over-engineering and was very expensive to produce. However, once it had gotten through its childhood illnesses, as it were, it was a formidable part of Nazi Germany's arsenal. Now, the development of the Tiger came out of the need for heavy tanks after Operation Barbarossa. The medium Soviet T-34 and heavy KV-1 proved superior to German Panzer 35T light tanks and anti-tank weapons. And German tanks were so ineffective against better armored Soviet tanks that the Soviet tanks would simply destroy their foes by driving over them. Now, to counter the Red Army's arms, the Germans engineered a massive 60-ton monster that combined heavy armor that was between 100 and 200 millimeters thick, an 88mm KWK-36 tank gun, which was famed for its penetration and accuracy. Now, this gun took from 6 to 16 seconds to reload, and it could fire a shell up to 10,000 meters. Now, the secondary armament on the tank was the standard Maschinengewehr 34 machine gun, and powering this massive beast was a Maybach HL230 V12 engine, which was capable of generating 690 horsepower. Now, with a crew of 5, the tank could travel at about 20 kilometers an hour in open country and up to 40 kilometers an hour on roads, and it had an operational range of between 100 and 200 kilometers. Now, one of the weaknesses of the tank was the over-engineered track, wheel, and suspension system. And while it allowed the tank to perform better in off-road conditions, the snow, mud, and ice of the Soviet autumn rainy season, or Rasputitsa, were hell on the wheels. They would frequently freeze up and require extensive maintenance to get them back in working order. Another issue not thought about by the engineers in Germany was the width of the tank. Now, fully equipped with its wide tracks in place, the Tiger I was 3.56 meters wide. When it was loaded on a train, particularly one traveling over the Soviet rail systems, the sides stuck out. And such things as tunnels and trackside obstructions became a hazard when moving the Tigers by train. Another engineering issue created by the weight of the tracks was its inability to cross small bridges that usually had around a 35-ton weight limit. Thus, the tanks had to ford most small streams. However, they were limited to crossing water that was no more than 2 meters deep. And because of the substantial amount of time and materials that went into production of the vehicle, the Tiger series of tanks were infamously expensive, costing more than 4 times as much to produce as the ubiquitous Panzer IVs. As the war wore on, production became more problematic as fuel, materials, and factory labor began to fall into short supply. Now, in spite of all these shortfalls, the Tiger I's battlefield performance was impressive. Tiger I and II tanks destroyed over 10,000 enemy tanks and 11,000 anti-tank and artillery pieces. And with its heavy firepower, if a Tiger could get in the first shot, most other tanks, as well as anti-tank weapons, were doomed. Now, as the kinks were ironed out, the Tiger did become a formidable battlefield asset. While it was intended to be a largely offensive weapon, it began to shine due to its defensive capabilities, its ability to counterattack, and in-troop support. Now, like German automobiles, it did require careful driving and lots of maintenance. And for every 2 days of fighting, it had to spend 1 day in the shop, and it usually required a team of mechanics and 2 or 3 SD KFZ-9 FAMO half-tracks to tow the tanks from place to place. By January of 1944, the Tiger II was being produced, and the Tiger I was quickly phased out of production. After the war, most of the Tigers were used as military targets, or they were stripped and melted down. And today there are only 9 surviving tanks left, with only a single one still in working order. Now, as a side note, the tank's humorous and somewhat racy crew manual, the Tigerfibel, was the first of its kind for the German army, and its success resulted in more unorthodox manuals that attempted to emulate its style, and I've included a link to a PDF facsimile of the Tigerfibel in the video description. Now, in the game itself, the Tiger I works its magic, generally when it's fulfilling a defensive capacity, and to take advantage of its firepower, deploy it as close to enemy units as possible. Okay, this week's game is Panzerblitz. This is a popular one, and it was published in 1970 by the Avalon Hill Game Company. Its designer was Jim Dunnigan. So we're going to break the rules down, and we'll start by talking about some of the components. Now, the map board has 3 sections. It's interesting because it's considered a geomorphic map board. In other words, it's capable of being changed by rearranging the 3 sections in any variety of ways. Also note on the map that the half hexes on the outer edge of the board are considered playable, and they can be utilized as if they were complete hexagons. Also note that for movement or combat purposes, if a hex contains a type of terrain, it's assumed that all of that hex is that type of terrain. The Terrain Effects chart, or TEC, goes into more detail on terrain. Now, the square cardboard pieces represent either platoons or company-sized military units of several different types, for instance, infantry, tanks, assault guns, etc. And they have the following factors printed on them. They have an attack factor, or the AF, which is a basic offensive power of the given unit. They have a range factor, which is the maximum effective distance in hexagons that a unit's attack force can be used against enemy units. They have a defense factor, or DF, which is the basic defensive strength of a given unit. And they have a movement factor, which is the basic maximum number of hexagons which a unit can move in one turn. And this capability, of course, can be reduced or increased by terrain effects. To set up the game, each game scenario is outlined on a situation card, and this delineates the map configuration, the units used, special rules, and victory conditions for each particular scenario. The game's played in turns, and each player moves and has combat sequentially. In other words, 2 player turns equals 1 complete game turn. Now, the turn track tells which player goes first and which player goes second in a turn. Now, the first step of the first player's turn is to resolve any minefield attacks against enemy units, and then the first player announces which of their units are attacking which enemy units and what attack techniques are being used. They then resolve all fire combat, and they roll the die once for each attack, and then the first player flips face down all firing units as they're fired to signify that they can't move further that turn. Then the first player moves as many face-up vehicular units as they desire, and during this step they execute any overrun attacks. Then the first player moves any face-up non-vehicular units and makes close assaults after doing so. And finally, the first player turns all of their units face up, including those dispersed by enemy attacks in the previous turn. The other player then follows this same sequence, and at the end of this play, the turn markers advance 1 space until the turn track indicates that the game ends. Movement's fairly straightforward. During their turn, a player can move as many or as few of their units as they desire, up to their maximum allowance. However, units that are either dispersed or have fired that turn may not move. And it costs a certain number of movement points to move through certain types of terrain, and the type of unit, for example, a truck, cavalry, or an armor unit, may have a different movement cost to move through different types of terrain. Now, units with a movement factor of 1 can always move 1 hex regardless of the terrain. And units can move through other friendly units. However, at the end of movement, the Russians can stack up to 2 units per hex, and the Germans can stack up to 3 units per hex. An exception to this is if a unit is being carried by another unit, in which the carrier and the carried only count as a single unit. Now, minefields and fortifications don't count towards stacking. However, blocked and wreck counters do. Also note that units cannot stack on swamp road hexes. Now, with the exception of overruns, units cannot move through hexes containing enemy units. However, they can move through hexes surrounding enemy units. Now, the unique thing about Panzerblitz is that there's no zones of control, as there are in most other wargames. Now, units traveling along roads do so at the road movement rate, regardless of the other terrain in the road hex. However, roads don't alter the defense effects of the surrounding terrain. And all units move along roads at a cost of 1/2 of a movement point per hex. However, entering a road hex through a non-road hex side is done at the movement point cost of the other terrain in the road hex being entered. And units cannot stack or move through other friendly units while moving along a road at the road movement rate. However, they can bypass other units on a road, but this costs the full non-road movement cost of the other terrain in the hex, as well as the next hex that they move into. In other words, it's 2 hexes. And this represents passing the unit sitting on the road by swinging off the road and maneuvering around it. If a unit's prohibited from moving through the terrain of a hex that surrounds a road, they can't perform this passing maneuver. Also, units can always stack with other units and move along road hexes at a non-road movement rate. And a unit in such a stack could very well split off and move ahead by itself at the road movement rate. Now remember, a vehicle with passengers is considered as a single unit, and therefore both may travel together at the road movement rate. Now, I've mentioned that some units can be transported, so both armored units, which includes tanks and assault guns, and the C-class vehicular units, which are wagons, trucks, and half-tracks, have the capability of carrying 1 non-vehicular unit, which are guns, infantry, and command posts. Now, to symbolize this, you place the unit being carried under the transporting unit. and if the passenger unit's sitting on top of the transporting unit, it's not being carried. Now, transporting units can load, they can transport, or they can transport and unload. However, they may only do one of these actions per turn. To load a unit, both units have to start their turn in the same hex, and the passenger is placed underneath the transport, and their movement's over. Now, dispersed units can't be loaded or unloaded. Also note that Russian cavalry can't be transported by other units. In other words, you can't have a T-34 carrying a horse on top of it. Now, the passenger can't fire during loading, transport, or unloading. However, the transporting unit can fire. Now, during transportation, a truck or wagon unit and the unit it's transporting have a combined defense factor of 1. And any elimination dispersal due to combat affects both the carrier and the passenger. Now, when using armor or half-tracks as transport, the defense factor of the carrier unit is used when attacked. If an armored unit is destroyed while transporting, both the passenger and carrier are destroyed. Now, units traveling on armored units can be specifically targeted for attack, exclusive of the armored unit, and in such cases the passenger unit has a defense factor of 1. The armored unit, however, is unaffected if only its passengers are being attacked. And passengers can't move independently on the turn in which they unload from transporting units. However, the carrier can. Now, the block counters represent tank traps, roadblocks, barbed wire, felled trees, and anything else that might impede movement. And blocks can be placed anywhere on the board with a limit of 1 block per hex. Now, once played, they can't be moved or removed from the game. And a unit can only enter a hex with a block in it if it begins its turn directly adjacent to the block. Upon entering that block hex, the unit has to stop, and it can't go any further that turn. Now, in their next turn, the unit can move off the block at the normal movement rate. Also, blocks don't obstruct line of sight, and they have no effect upon combat. Now, when a fortification is destroyed, you replace it with a block counter. Now, note that a block counter on a road negates the road in that hex, and vehicular units cannot enter block road hexes in swamps, nor can they traverse directly adjacent forest hex sides when moving off a block road hex. Now, whenever an armored vehicle unit, including half-tracks, is destroyed in combat, it's replaced by a wreck counter. And wrecks impede movement for both sides by negating that 1/2 movement modification on the road hex, which now count as surrounding terrain in regards to movement point costs. Like blocks, wrecks can't be moved or removed. Now, vehicle units cannot enter those swamp road hexes containing wrecks, nor can they cross green hex sides from a road hex with a wreck in it. Now, units can enter hexes containing enemy and or friendly wrecks as long as they don't exceed stacking limits, with each wreck counting as 1 unit for stacking purposes. Thus, it could be possible to have as many as 3 Germans or 2 Russian wrecks in a box, or a combination of German and Russian wrecks, not exceeding a total of 3. However, this hex would now be impassable by any other units. And finally, note that wrecks have no effect on combat. Now, mines are placed on the board, 1 mine per hex, anywhere that a player wishes. And mines cannot be moved during the game, and they affect both sides equally. They're never depleted, however, they can be removed by engineering units. Now, if a unit moves into a minefield, it has to stop, and the opposing player gets to attack that unit at the beginning of the combat portion of their turn. And this is always done at a 2-to-1 ratio, and the surviving units can move off during their next movement phase. However, if the unit, quote-unquote, attacked by the minefield is dispersed, they can't leave the minefield hex during their next turn. Now, as I said before, engineers can remove mines by moving adjacent to them, and the following turn they roll a die, and on a 1 the minefield is removed. Otherwise it's not, though the engineer can continue to try every turn until they succeed. Fortifications consist of bunkers, redoubts, prepared trenches, etc. And units in these fortifications, that is underneath the fortification counter, defend using the defense factor of the fortification only. In other words, their own defense factors don't count. When fortifications defend, terrain and weapon effectiveness are also taken into account, and fortification counters are considered armored targets. If a fortification is destroyed, all the units within that fortification are also destroyed. Now, units within a fortification can fire out normally, however, the fortification counter has no offensive capabilities. And they are placed wherever the player desires, except on swamp hexes or mines, or as directed by the situation card. Now, only 1 fortification can be placed in a hex, and once it's placed, it can't be moved. Fortifications have no effect on movement, and any unit can occupy a fortification. Thus, unoccupied fortifications could be captured and used by either player. To capture a fortification, you simply move a unit under the unoccupied fortification counter, and these unoccupied fortifications can also be destroyed. However, a player has to attack them to do so. Now, friendly units can also be placed on the hex on top of a fortification counter, in which case they are outside of the fortification and they don't get any of the fortification's benefits. However, they do prevent enemy units from entering that hex to besiege the fortification. Now, enemy units can occupy a fortified space as long as there's no opponents in the same hex, outside of the fortification. Now note, this is the only time in the game a friendly and an enemy unit can occupy the same hex. If an enemy unit occupies the same hex as a friendly fortification, units inside of that fort are besieged and they can't leave that hex. Also note that the enemy unit outside of the fort can use close combat tactics, but the defenders inside cannot. Now, if friendly units are in a fortification and enemy units are in the same hex, the fortified player can fire from other hexes on those enemy units. However, there is a chance of harming the units through friendly fire. And to simulate this, you roll 2 die, one to represent the attack of the enemy units, and one the attack on the friendly units. Finally, armored vehicles cannot make overrun attacks against fortifications. Now, there are 3 types of combat in this game: fire attacks, overruns, and close combat. And if a unit makes a fire attack in a turn, they can't move in that same turn. However, if they perform an overrun or close combat, they can move and attack in the same turn. Now, fire attacks always take place before movement. Fire attacks all follow the same mechanic. First, the attacker determines which units that they wish to attack, and these units must be within the attacker's range and line of sight. The attacker then cross-references the weapon's effects chart to see if the combat can proceed and if the attacker's strength needs to be modified. Next, the attacker consults the terrain effects chart to see if the terrain that the target is in modifies their defensive factor. Then a final combat ratio is determined and a d6 is rolled. And this is cross-indexed on the combat results table and the results determined. And finally, the combat result is immediately applied to the defending unit. Now, fire attacks are always optional. Players aren't forced to make them. And to make a direct fire attack, the enemy unit must be within the range factor and line of sight of the attacking player. Also note that every unit firing on specific defending units may combine their attack factors together to do so. Further, individual attackers cannot split their attack factors amongst several defending units. And finally, no attacking unit can attack more than one defender in a turn. Now, when there's more than one defending unit stacked in a hex, attacks against that stack of units can be done in one of 3 ways. First, a selective attack. The attacker can choose to attack only the weakest defending unit in that stack, and that is a single unit where the odds ratio would be highest for the attacker. The other defending units in the stack are not affected by this attack. Second is a multiple attack, in which the attacker can attack more than one unit in a stack, attacking each defender individually. Now, in this case, the weakest defender must be attacked first, followed by the next weakest, and so on. Now, these attacks have to be done at least 1-to-1 odds, otherwise they can't be carried out. And several units can be used to attack each specific defending unit, though no defending unit may be attacked more than once. Also, more than one unit in the defending stack can be attacked together. Now, each unit attacked is treated as a separate battle, with the die being rolled once for each battle. Finally, there's combination attack, and this is the simplest form of firing attack. All the defending units are treated as one combined defense factor, while all the attackers as one combined attack factor. The die is rolled once for the entire stack, and the result applies to all the defending units in that stack. Now, before talking about the specific mechanics of firing any further, let's take a detour into the range and line of sight rules, as it's both an extremely important and somewhat confusing component in understanding the game. Basically, in order to fire on a target, the firing unit has to clearly see the target, and this is called line of sight. If a firing unit has a clear line of sight, they attack up to the full extent of their range. And range is the shortest number of hexes from the firing unit to the target. Now, if there are 2 equal paths from the attacker to the target, use the one that's the least favorable to the attacker. In other words, if 2 hex paths are equidistant and one goes through an obstruction, the range calculation would also go through that obstruction. There are 2 things in the game that can block line of sight: obstacles between the firing unit and the target, and changes in elevation. And remember that units, wrecks, blockages, and fortifications never block line of sight. Now, the interrelationship between elevations and obstacles is summarized on the target elevation table, or the TET, and obstacles are always indicated by a heavy line along a hex side. And there are 3 levels of obstacles to consider. The first are low obstacles that include gray line village hex sides and green forest hex sides. Slopes are medium obstacles, and they're represented by these orangish-brown hex sides, and hill crests are considered high obstacles, and they have the bright red hex sides. Now, whether a unit can see over these depends on the elevation of the firing unit and the target, and there are 3 elevations in the game: ground level, slope level, and hilltop level. Now, when firing from a ground level hex to another ground level hex, if the line of sight passes through any kind of obstacle, line of sight is blocked. Now, one of the things that can get confusing here is that if a hex contains any kind of obscuring terrain, the entire hex is considered to consist of that type of terrain. A tank that ends its movement in a wooded hex is invisible unless an enemy unit is directly adjacent to it, even though the tank may have moved to that position in full view of the enemy and fired from that position as well. And this ability of units to hop from one woods hex to another without being attacked is called the Panzerbush syndrome. However, it's also important to remember that units in adjacent hexes can always fire on each other no matter what terrain or elevation is involved. Now, units generally have a line of sight through one orange hex side, but not 2. Thus, they can fire from or to the lip of a hilltop, but not into the hexes that are to the rear of the lip of the hilltop, and thus through 2 heavy orange lines. The exception to this is if a unit is firing from one hilltop to another hilltop, and also note that when firing from hilltop to hilltop, gray and green lines don't get in the way. Now, when firing from a slope or a hilltop to a ground level target, if the target's hiding directly behind a gray or green hex side, then the line of sight is obstructed. Now, directly behind means that the target is in the hex that is adjacent to that heavy gray or green line. Likewise, if firing from a position directly behind a gray or green hex side to a target on a slope or hilltop, the line of sight is also obstructed. If the object is not directly behind the gray or green hex sides, both are in the line of sight of each other. Now, to determine if the brown slope hex side symbols are obstructing line of sight when firing from a hillside to ground level, count the number of hexes from the firing unit to the brown hex side symbol and the number of hexes from the brown hex side symbol to the target. If the distance from the firing unit to the brown hex side is equidistant or greater than the distance from the brown hex side, the target is out of sight. If the distance from the firing unit to the brown hex side is less than the distance from the brown hex side to the target unit, then the target is in line of sight. Hopefully this visual will make all of that clearer. Also note that the converse to this is true. If a unit is firing from the ground to a hilltop and there's an intervening ridge, the distance from the ground unit to the ridge has to be greater from the ridge to the target unit on the hilltop. Now, in a few cases, there are larger hills on the map board, and it's best to think of these as rounded hilltops rather than flat plateaus. In the case of the large hilltop on board 3, all hexes on the hill are considered hilltop hexes, even though they don't all have that bright red-orange hex side. And any gray or green symbols on hilltops obstructs all fire, no matter what the elevation of the firing unit or the target. Now, you'll notice that in some cases, slope hexes don't have the brown hex side symbols. And this is because the brown symbols actually represent the way in which the slopes curve and form corners to obstruct the line of sight. Consequently, whenever a slope is relatively straight, it doesn't obstruct the line of sight along it. And in some instances, 2 or more slope hexes meet without a hilltop being formed between them. And this represents a ridge or razorback hilltop. The brown hex side symbols represent the spine of these ridges. I can't find a lot of information in the rules that indicate how to resolve line of sight when firing from one slope hex to another on the same hill, so I've house ruled it in that a unit can fire through no more than one light brown hex if both the firing unit and the target are on the same hillside. Now, the gullies and stream beds shown on the board are depressions below ground level, and they don't obscure line of sight if a unit is firing over those gullies. However, if a target unit is in a gully, firing units at ground level or in other gully hexes may not establish a line of sight on that target unit unless they're in an adjacent hex. Also, hexes containing the end or beginning of a gully are treated as full-fledged gullies. Now, units in gullies can fire at or be fired at by units on slopes and hilltops. And in these cases, you treat the unit in the gully as if it were ground level for terrain elevation purposes. Fords represent exposed, not depressed areas of a stream bed, and they're equivalent to clear terrain for all purposes. The hexagons in which a road crosses a gully are also considered as clear terrain, even if for some reason the road becomes unusable. Now, one thing that can help in line of sight is establishing spotters. Now, target units in wood or town hexes can be fired on from distant units if the firing unit has a spotter unit in a hex adjacent to that target. And spotting units can spot any number of adjacent units, and they don't necessarily have to be involved in the attack upon the spotted unit. However, the spotter unit can never be a dispersed unit. Now, once you finally determine this line of sight, it's time to fire your guns and get back into the actual mechanics of combat resolution. So the next step is to compare the firing unit and the target unit on the Weapons Effects Chart, or WEC. First, you determine the type of weapon firing. That could be infantry I, armor A, or howitzers and mortars, which is H and M. You determine if the target is armor or anything else, and armor is further divided into 2 columns. If the armor is at half of the firing unit's full range or not, and when determining half range, always round down from the full range. Then you cross-index to determine if combat can still occur, and if it can, what kind of modifiers will apply to the attacking unit. Either half attack factors, normal attack factors, or double attack factors. Now, when making normal combination attacks against mixed stacks of units, determine what type of target, armored or non-armored, predominates in that stack, and then treat the entire stack as if all of the units in it were that type of target. If the target stack's divided evenly between armored and non-armored targets, treat the whole stack as if it were the type of target least favorable to that particular attacking unit. Now, all units in towns, armored or not, are considered armored, and they must be attacked as single stacks. And as I mentioned before, fortifications are also considered armored targets. Next, you check for terrain modifiers for the terrain that the defender's in, and you do this on the terrain effects chart. Now, with the exception of slopes, most terrains that offer cover will add modifiers to the combat die roll. Now, remember that in this game, low rolls by the attacker are more effective, while high die rolls are less effective. Being on a hill or slope offers some defense to the target unit, and this is represented by having the attack factor of the attacking unit. Now, there are 2 special exceptions to this. When a defending unit's on a hilltop, an attacking unit is not halved if it's also on a hilltop, not necessarily the same one. A defender on a hilltop could conceivably be attacked by units not on hilltops, and units on hilltops as part of the same attack, in which case the attackers not on the hilltop would still be halved. Second, when a defender's on a slope, the attacking unit is not halved if the attacker is directly adjacent to the defender, regardless of elevation. If, however, there's a brown hex side symbol between an adjacent attacker and defender, the attacking unit's factor is halved. Now, units on slopes can conceivably be attacked by attacking units which are halved, and units which are not halved as part of the same attack. Now, once weapon and terrain modifiers have been factored into the attack, determine the final odds by comparing the modified attack factor of the firing unit to the modified defense factor of the target unit. And this comparison is expressed as a ratio and rounded down to one of the odds on the combat result table, always in the defender's favor. Finally, you roll a die 6, and any modifiers are added or subtracted, and one of 4 results can occur based on the cross-indexed result on the CRT. These results include the dash, which indicates that the attack misses and nothing occurs, a D, which indicates the target's dispersed, and any further attacks against a dispersed unit that round are made with a -1 modifier on the attacker's die roll. Now, during this dispersed player's next full round, they can't move or attack with these dispersed units. At the end of that player's round, however, they do remove all of the dispersed markers from their units. Next is a DD, and if the target has not been previously dispersed, they're now dispersed. However, if the target unit was previously dispersed, that unit's eliminated. And finally, the X, which means that the unit is immediately eliminated and removed from the map board. Now, armored vehicle units can overrun enemy units during their movement phase, and they do this by moving through the hex that the enemy unit is in, and then moving into a hex behind the enemy and directly opposite the one that they attacked from. Now, overruns provide several benefits for the attacker. The attack can be made during the movement phase, and it increases the odds ratio of the attack by 1 column in favor of the attacker. Further, 2 is subtracted from the die roll of the attack. Thus, if the attacker rolled a 5, this would now be interpreted as a 3. Now, this attack is made when the overrunning unit is in the hex with the defender. Now, in determining overrun odds, use only the factors printed on the units for attacker and defender. You don't have or double the attack factors as shown on the weapons effectiveness chart. Also, the defending stack is treated as 1 combined defense factor when being overrun. And more than 1 armored unit can overrun an enemy stack, and the overrunning units do not have to enter and exit through the same hex. They must, however, combine their attacks into 1 large attack factor. In other words, a defending unit or stack cannot suffer more than 1 overrun attack per turn. Now, once the overrun is done, the attacking units may not move any further that turn. Now, there's also several restrictions that can prevent overruns. The first is that the overrunning unit has to have enough movement points to move through the enemy unit and into the exit hex. Next, overruns cannot be performed if the attacking unit has made any road movement in that turn. Third, the unit that is overrun must be in clear terrain. However, neither the entry or exit hex need to be in clear terrain. Fourth, the German SPA units, which are the Maltier, the Vespa, and the Hummel, may not make overrun attacks. And half-tracks cannot overrun armored vehicles, including enemy half-tracks. Fifth, units on block, wreck, minefield, or fortification counters cannot be overrun. And finally, overrunning units cannot fire an overrun in the same turn. Now, Russian and German infantry and engineering units, as well as Russian cavalry units, have the option of using close assault tactics instead of making a normal attack. Now, close assaulting units are more effective, and they subtract 2 from the die roll result of an attack. For instance, a die roll of 3 becomes a die roll of 1. In the case of close assaults, the defending stack has to be treated as 1 combined defense factor, and like overruns, they can suffer only 1 close assault per turn. At the end of their movement, the assaulting unit has to be in the hex adjacent to the enemy. And note that attacking an adjacent enemy is always optional. And close assault can be used in any type of terrain. In fact, close assault is the only way in which an infantry unit can attack armored vehicle units. Now, if at least 1 engineer unit is stacked with an infantry or cavalry unit and is close assaulting the same defender, the effectiveness of that close assault is further increased by raising the odds in their favor to the next highest ratio, as was done in the overrun rule. Also, no unit may use the road movement rate and make a close assault in the same turn. Finally, Russian cavalry cannot move more than 1 hex in a turn in which they're being used for close assault. Okay, this is the first scenario of Panzerblitz. Now, before I get started, I just have a couple of little warnings. Panzerblitz was a very early game, and Jim Dunnigan was basically pioneering the rules for it as he was developing it. And for this reason, sometimes the rules are a little bit wanting. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to stick with the Panzerblitz rules as originally written. And the 2 things I'm trying to avoid for now are using retrofitted Panzerleader rules and using house rules. Now, in this game, I'm already going to break Rule 2, as I can't seem to find rules that deal with 2 common situations. One is firing from woodlands, and basically I allow it. And the second is firing from slope to slope hexes, and I say a limit of firing through 1 light brown hex side if both the attacker and defender are on the same slope. Now, if you know of any Panzerblitz rules as written that address these 2 situations, let me know down below. Okay, let's get started. This is Panzerblitz situation number 1. It's a Russian rear area raid, and it's taking place in July of 44. A couple of things to note about this on the setup is the Russian forces can come in on any side of the map, or either side, I guess, of the map. They can come in on the left or right side of the map, and they can come in from 1 hex. So they have to come in from a single hex. I played this before with the coming in on 2 hexes, but I guess rules say only 1. And the other thing is the German setup is they have to be set up on here. It's 132. For some reason, they've got a guy back here on 129. They have to set up a little command post. Won't do anything in the game. And then the third fort command post has to be set up within 3 hexes of this one right here. So this is from a article in the General that a lot of people have used in this first scenario as a German setup. So they were not going to have a lot to do in the first 3 or 4 turns because they're just going to be waiting for the Russians to move onto the map. And in fact, generally, they're going to be pretty stationary. They're just going to be doing a defensive battle. Decisive victory for the Soviets/Russians is 16 or more. They have to destroy 16 or more units with command posts counting as 5. Germans can win a decisive victory if they get 2 or less destroyed. So should be interesting. Excuse me, they're doing harvesting soybeans right now, and there's a lot of dust in the air. So if I'm coughing, I apologize. I'll try to drink some hot coffee while I'm doing this. Another couple things to note, just on terminology. I tend to use Russian and Soviet interchangeably. I also tend to say, when I talk about these guys, I may say tank. I do mean a tank unit. I had a guy chastised me the other day online about that. Well, they're not tanks. They're tank units. Get it right. And I'm like, okay. So you guys will kind of know what I mean. Oh, the other is the term dispersed versus disrupted. I may use those interchangeably. I do mean dispersed. I noticed watching a YouTube video, some guys that did a pretty good job playing it, but they were using disruption markers on these. So I think I'm not the only one that says or does that, but I technically mean disrupted. I got to get it right. So, other thing is, the Soviets are going to come onto the map, and I'm going to say they can come on loaded. versus having to stage on the map. So they'll be staging off the map. That only makes sense. And when I do that, I want to be sure and bring on those infantry, carry those on the tanks. So get rid of that. Well, let's get this guy. Let's start with number 1 here. And he's not loaded. Okay. We're going to go with, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Getting on the hill, 6, 7, 8. And 9, 10, 11. That's as far as he can move. And I'll just bring his little buddy behind him here. Again, loaded with infantry. And then the next one, we'll just move here. Do I have an infantry to put on there? I don't. Okay. I'll bring in this artillery unit here. Let's just make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually, I'm going to bring him up around here. I can go into that gully. I think it costs 3 to get out of a gully. I'm new at this game, so like I say, I've played it a few times, but still consider myself a total newbie with it. So if you see stuff I'm doing wrong, let me know down below. Like I say, the only thing I care to say is if it's not Panzerblitz rules as written, let me know as such. Like say it's a house rule, or say, well, Panzer Leader says, or whatever. Because I generally am not big on, including, I'm generally big on, I'm okay with including house rules and things like that in games. I do think that games can be pretty fluid, but with some of these old Avalon Hill games that have a pretty staunch fan base, I try to be kind of careful, because you do get some blowback. But so 3, yeah. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just that you just got to be like, okay, I guess perspective, that's what I'm aiming at here. I'm going to put this, where did I go? Forget that. Okay, let's clean this up here. I'm getting kind of lost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can't go any further. And he's going to be carrying this mortar. Okay. I just didn't carry him because he was a little hard to carry that guy. Okay. 1. And I'm going to have him carry this guy. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Move these guys here. Actually, I'm going to move these guys to the front, and then we'll move these carts. I don't know why I've got 2 extra carts here. If you guys can tell me why I need those, let me know. I guess you could, the German player could shoot those down just for the points, but like I said, the German player is really going to be concerned with taking out some guys that can really threaten him. So, okay, Russian move is done. We can move to turn 2. Hopefully I won't get lost on turns. I do that all the time. Okay. German player, nothing much I'm going to do here, so we're good. Okay, Russians can go again, and I'm going to move through force here. That's 1. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I want to drop anybody off? I think I'll stay put. Everybody else stay put here. Do I want to drop this guy off? And see, the issue is if you stack these guys, you can run into some real problems. So okay. 1, and these cost 3 for cavalry, so they can't move any further. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Can't move any further. Okay. And that's it for the Russian move. Germans are going to stay put. We move to turn 3. Okay, this is where the crux of the game, because I've started to move these guys in, and I'm really going to, the keystone is to take this out here. So we're going to have to figure a way to get that taken out. First thing I'm going to do is move these guys into place here. Going to unload. I think that's all I'm going to do right now is unload. And unload, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Oh, I could. Those guys could stack. I didn't realize that. Okay. Move these guys around. And I think that's going to be it. And again, the Germans aren't going to be able to do anything. Okay, now turn 4. Okay, this is the, I promised you last turn would be the crux, but this is going to be when things get excited. Oh, crap. I just left that guy. He has a move of 0. I didn't look at that. So he's stuck there. Well, son of a gun. I know what I can do. I'm going to bring these guys around. Okay, it's nobody's going to fire, but we're going to move. And we'll start with this guy here and here. And these guys will move. And then these guys will move. And this guy will move into place here. And I asked what I was going to do with these. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Soviets have moved, and this guy can move, and then I can close combat with these, this infantry, and those 2 cavalry. So I'm going to do that very thing against. Actually, I can't. I don't think I can close combat against a unit in woods. Actually, maybe I can. Let's just check the rules out here. Okay, it looks like, yes, they can make that attack. Let me get the moves out of the way here. So they've moved into here, and then they're going to attack. And I think one of these guys is going to make a close combat to this. And do I need to check the charts? I don't think. This is considered an infantry unit against a anything else. This is not an armored vehicle. It's a armor. It's a anti. A stands for anti-armor. Or I guess anti-armor, is that it? Or armor piercing, that's it. Armor piercing. So that gets a little confusing when you're thinking of armored vehicles and armored piercing. They didn't do a great job of delineating those. So, but that's normal attack. So I think that's at least a 4-to-1, and you'll notice that any 4-to-1s are pretty much an elimination unless you get a roll of 7 for whatever reason. So we're going to take that off. And then this guy, the other cavalry guy, 10 and 8, and 8 is going to be 16. So 26 to 40 is 1-to-2 odds. Let's check the weapons chart. Infantry to armored, only close assault, so that doesn't matter. Terrain, no, it's a hilltop, but it's per the cost of the other terrain. So. And we're fighting hilltop to hilltop. So 1-to-2 looks pretty simple. We get a 6, so nothing. Oh, and it would have been -2, so it would have been a 4. I'm sorry. But still, that's nothing. So, okay. Now the Germans can go, and they're going to have a little fun here. I think it's going to be important to try to get rid of these guys. That's going to be super important here. I can fire from here to here. And then this guy can fire to here. I think I'll concentrate fire. Wait, this 14 and this is a 8. Okay. So let's fire. Let's take care of this first. Okay, so these guys are going to fire for 8. And then 14 is going to be 22. And that's going to be armor piercing against infantry, so it's halved, I think. So 22 is half, yeah. So 11 to 10, 11 to 8, so it's going to be 1-to-1 odds. And we roll a 4 at 1-to-1, so that's nothing. Okay. Then this guy's going to do a 20 to 9 armor to armor. Armor to armor, 20 to 9 is double, so 40 to 9. So 4-to-1 odds. Oh, that's an elimination. And we will send him to the graveyard. Okay. And we can mark him as fired. Okay, the artillery have gone. Nobody else can go here. These guys are out of sight. And going to move these guys into position here. Actually, hold on. I'm going to move this guy and this guy into position. And this guy, I'll move this guy up. And I'm going to move this guy. And no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep those guys where they're at. Not going to risk it. Okay. So now we can do close assaults, and they're going to have a 6, 12, 14 against a... we're just going to attack one of them. 14 to 8. Oh. Those guys are going to move there instead. I'm going to move that guy there, that guy there. Don't think anybody can move around. I hope he can. Let's go back. And I was going to say those engineers. I'm going to wait until... Man, those engineers are useful. But this guy is fairly... I'll just take it defensive. I'll just take it and see. Wait for the Soviets to make a mistake. Okay, back to this. 6, 12 to 8. I'm just attacking one of them, so... it's going to be 1-to-1 minus 2. 3, 2. Okay, well, I disrupted one of these guys. Okay. And that ends the German turn. Okay, any German units that fired, I can remove the fired from... Yeah, like I say, I was trying to think about that. Those engineers are super helpful for the Germans, and to get them moved into position, I could hit the Soviets pretty hard, but I think I'd get glommed up on pretty quick. So, like I say, we'll kind of wait for the Russians to make a mistake. Let's go to turn 5. Okay. Turn 5. I think I'll make an artillery attack. These guys are all in a town. So that counts as armor. Which is kind of helpful. And then towns have a +1 to the attacker die roll. They could attack here. Everybody could attack here. I'm going to go with... What do mortars do against armor? Normal. Okay. So this is double, 24, and 2, 25, 26. 24 and 26 is 50. 50 and 12. 24 is 74. Okay, so we've got 74 to 40. 1-to-1 odds. Doesn't really help me any. I'm going to try to shoot this guy. So we're going to go with a 24. I think I can eliminate this guy, I would think. Doesn't feel right, but let's just hit this stack and see what happens. So I've got 24 and 2, 26 to 16. 26 to 16. Oh, that's right. You have to shoot. You have to aim. Well, okay. You have to aim at the one that has the lowest defensive capability. I can do that when I'm on a stack. So this 12 to 1, I think I can hit and would automatically eliminate him. I mean, it's going to be at least 4-to-1 odds, -1 or +1, unless it's a 7. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's going to eliminate him. Okay. Now, this guy, he's fired. And then now we can see here we've got doubled 1, 2, that's 48. So these two firing here. And then that would leave this mortar with 2. Mortar to a stack of artillery. So mortar is going to have 3 to 5. 1 to 2 plus 1. And I get a 3 for nothing. Okay, that's nothing. Now then, these guys are going to go 1-to-1 against that fortress. They roll a 3 at 1-to-1 is a dispersed. Okay. Now movement. 1, 2, 3. And those guys will move. And then finally our close combat. Okay, we've got an 8 and a 10. It's 18. And another 8 is a 26 to 40. So 1-to-2 odds. I get a -2, but these guys are also dispersed, so that's -3. So 1-to-2, -3. I roll a 6, so that's a 3, so that's nothing. Okay, and that ends the Soviet turn. Take off the fired marker. Fired. Take off the dispersed. Okay, everybody's gone. Okay, Germans get to go. I've lost that guy, so now it's time I can move out and attack. So let's start. These guys can't do anything. The only thing I can really do is I could try to attack this stack with that mortar, which is 8 to 3, 2-to-1 odds. An A against an M. Okay. 8 to 3. That's half. Okay, 4 to 3, so 1-to-1 odds. With a 3. 1-to-1 with a 3. Okay, I've got a dispersed. Not bad. Okay, so everybody's done everything there. Now, these guys are going to move here. And I think I'll move out of the town here. Stay put here. And then these guys will do a close attack here. And a close attack against this stack. Now, I don't know if the dispersed would count or not. I don't think it really says. So we're going to do the close attack against the... actually, we're going to take it against that tank there. So we're... Where's that mobile artillery? I don't know. Anyway. Okay. 12 to... And we're going to just go against one of these guys. So we're going to go 1-to-1 odds. And -2 is a 1. So that's a -1. And a -1 is an X. So one of these guys is eliminated. And here I've got 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to 9. So 1-to-1, but I've got an engineer making it 2-to-1 -2. 2-to-1 -2. With a 3, that's a 1, and it's an X. Okay, so we send another one to the bottom. This isn't a naval game. Okay, everybody's fired, everybody's charged. That is the end of turn. These turns go pretty fast once the game gets going. In fact, I probably won't even use turn maybe 8, 9, or 10. I should have this down pretty quick here. It should be, everything should be over but the crying. So, okay. Soviets go here. Whoops, I want to use my artillery first. Okay. Let's try to break some of these guys up. Since we're just kind of beating ourselves on here, maybe we should try something a little different. So I'm going to go 12, 24. Oh, that's only halved. Nope, I don't want to do that. That's shooting your tank at an infantry doesn't really help too much. So we're going to do it again here. I guess we're going to go 1-to-1 odds. Is that still 12? And 12 is 24, 48. So yeah, that's 1-to-1. And there's no, I can't think of any weapons effectiveness or terrain effects. So we'll just roll a 5 at 1-to-1. Nothing. Okay, that's going to be followed by movement. And a close assault. Okay, 10 and 8 and 8. 26 to 40. 1-to-2. -2. We get a 2, so a 0. 1-to-2 with a 0 is a DD. So these guys are disrupted. Dispersed, not disrupted. Okay. And that ends the Soviet turn. Okay, then the Germans are going to go. Going to fire. These guys are now in range, so I'm going to hit these guys with artillery. I'll do close assaults here and here. Yeah, I'll keep my engine. I'll do a close assault here. So let's start with the artillery here. Actually, this guy's in more danger than this guy. So let's try to take him first. So I've got an 8 to 8. That's 1-to-1. However, it's half. So it's going to be 1-to-2. And we roll a 1. Okay, 1-to-2 with a 1 is a disruption. Or dispersed, okay? And this guy fired. Then this guy's going to fire down here at a 8 to 8, 1 to 2 again, with a 1. So we dispersed another one. Put him on top. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do a close assault against... we're going to do a close assault against that armored unit there. So 4 to 9. 1 to 3 odds. The only thing I can get is a 1. So 6, no. Okay. Here we've got 2, 5. 5 to 3. Minus... Wait, it's got an engineer. So that's 5 to 3 is going to be 1 to 1 odds. Then we make it 2 to 1 with the engineer. 2 to 1 minus 2 plus this guy's dispersed. So that's 2 to 1 minus 3. We roll a 5 minus 3 is a 2. 2 to 1 with the 2 is a dispersed again, a DD. So that's a special dispersal. They've already been dispersed, so they're now eliminated. Okay. And then this guy here. Did I go with these guys? I think I already went with these guys, or did I? No, he was dispersed from the fire. Okay, so this guy still gets to go 12 to 8, 1 to 1, minus 2 minus 3. 1 to 1 minus 3 is a 6 minus 3 is a 3. So another dispersal, which wouldn't affect him. So, okay. We can remove the fired, and we can take out the dispersed and the dispersed. And that leaves us with the German turn over. Turn track 7. Okay. We're going to make do the same thing here. 1 to 2. With a 5, nothing. Okay. This guy will move up. This guy can move. Might as well move in range. Drop off. And we'll drop off here and drop off here. Okay, those guys can drop off. Don't want it, that stacking, that weird stacking rule is what you're going to have to avoid, because you can really, if you drop him off, then it ends up being you overstack. So, and this guy can't move. So you can eventually leave these guys. If you had 2 of these guys stacked here, they'd be stuck. Again, it's not a well thought out rule, but I can't blame Dunnigan too much on this. He had a lot on his plate. This game came out in 1970, and at that point he was designing quite a few games, and he was trying to get SPI up and off the ground. So it was up, but he was just trying to get it going. So I mean, he had a lot on his plate. He was always a prolific game designer, and like I said, I don't think sometimes his rules came out well. The other issue is that in those days, tech writing wasn't necessarily what it is today, and I think a lot of times the rules were not really well hashed over. They didn't beat him with a rock until they could figure out any problems. So they tended to get things off the table and out so they could sell them, which they needed the capital. So that was it. So, okay, now back to my game here. These guys are going to charge against this guy here. I think we'll try to take him out. So we're going to go with a 10 to 3. So 2 to 1 odds. Minus 1. I'm sorry about my throat today, guys. Or minus 2. So that'd be a negative 1. 2 to 1, negative 1 is an X. So yeah. Hopefully they'll get like I said, they get the soybeans out and harvested. Right now it makes some really dramatic sunsets, but it doesn't do really well for the old breathing and allergies. Okay, this is going to be a 16 to 41 to 3 odds. Let's just see what I can do. 1 to 3 minus 2. Oh, -1 to 3 -2 is a -1 DD. Okay, these guys are disrupted. Or dispersed. Dispersed. Get that right. Okay. Now I can take off the little markers. Take off the fired. And like I said, this module needs these Vassal modules. Usually they have a button you can hit to take off like disrupted and fired markers, but this one doesn't have one, which is too bad. But, okay. Russians get to go. We're in the same position. Oh, this guy was dispersed last turn. Yeah, okay. We've got a 1 to 2 odds here, and we get a 3. Nothing. Okay. We can make our movements. Get this guy out of the way. These guys will... Oh, wait, hold on. Before I do that, we're going to fire. I can fire at some guys. I've already did this firing. Put my fire here. Fired. And now these guys can go, and there's 3, 4, 5 to... let's see, who do I have an advantage on? Now they're in town. Oh, they're in town, so they count as armor. H and M count as armor, so normal. And then 3 and 2 is a 5 to... We'll just do against that artillery. So 5 to 3, 1 to 1 odds. Since he's in town, I add 1 to the roll. Okay, so 1 to 1 plus 1. And I got a 7, so nothing. Okay. Then I'm going to take these 2 infantry here, 16 to 40, 1 to 3, -2. Oh, and they're dispersed, so -3, 5. That's a 2. It was say 1 to 3, 2, nothing. Okay. And then this guy's going to go for 10 and 20 to... I'm going to go for just one of them. So 3 to 1. And these 3 to 1 -2. I get a 0. 3 to 1 with a 0 is an X. So that removes an infantry. And I didn't move anybody. Now I'll assume I can move. I'm going to move that guy there. That guy couldn't move. So, okay. I'll just move those after the fact. Sorry about that. Okay. Into that. We go to the German turn. German turn's going to be a move artillery. Oh, I can move this fired. Move this dispersed there. Got everybody. Yeah, the one thing about playing solitaire, you always forget little stuff because you don't have another person. You're concentrating on 2 sides at the same time. So, not that I'm a brainiac or anything. It's just that that's kind of how it goes. Okay. Starting by firing. This guy is really getting to be a pain in the ass. So let's start with him. And I'm going to start with an 8 to 8. He's in the woods, so that's a +1. 1 to 1 plus 1. A against I. Oh, it's halved. Okay. I'm going to attack. I'm going to fire with both of these guys. So we're going to fire with him and him. Now I have to use the most disadvantageous weapons. So it's going to be 10 and 8 is 18, or 9 to 8, 1 to 1 odds plus 1. And I get a 6, so that's nothing. Okay. These guys here are going to fire down with an 8 to 3, 2 to 1 odds. Let's see if there's any weapons things. Nope. Okay. So 2 to 1, no modifiers. We roll a 3. Dispersed. Okay. Those guys have all fired. I'm just going to put 1 here. I'll remember that. Okay, fire, fire, fire. Everybody's fired. I think I'll move here. Make a close attack. Here, make a close attack. Here, make a close attack. And so we'll start with this one. Close attack here is 5 to 1. 5 to 1 because I loaded these guys up. So, no, yeah, they loaded. They did not load because they moved in that last turn. So they're not loaded, but 5 to 4 would be 1 to 1. I'd make it 2 to 1. And then they're on a slope. And attackers are... Oh, attacker is a halved on the slope. Okay. Let's see. 2 and 5. So that's going to be halved as 2 to 4. 1 to 2 odds. And I get a 5. So nothing. Okay, here we've got a 4. Oh, and this had an engineer, so they would actually be. Let's go back and redo that. Okay, let's do this. This gets weird. Okay, so it's 5 halved. I'm just going to go against one guy here. 5 to 3. And that's going to be, but it's half. So that's 2 to 3, 1 to 2. It's 1 to 1 odds. I rolled a 5. Let's just go 1 to 1 with a 5. Minus 2 is 3. It would disrupt him. It disrupt this guy or disperse this guy. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, they don't, like I said, they need to use a real consistent, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. And it's like Dunnigan changed his mind halfway through. Okay. 4 to, let's go against the armor. 4 to 9 is a 1 to 2, no, 1 to 3 odds. Minus 2. And I get a 3, minus 2 is a 1. 1 to 3 with a 1 is a disrupted. Okay, so I disrupted this guy. Dispersed, 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 let's say it. And then here, a 6 to 8, 1 to 2, minus 2 is a 2, 1 to 2, 2 is a disrupted. Okay. Dispersed, dispersed, okay. And that ends the German turn. Ugh. Okay, that got a little hairy. So they got an engineer on a slope. Again, when you're designing games, I think just using one set of modifiers applying to either the die roll, particularly I think the die roll is the easier way to do it than to try, to keep doubling and having combat factors and everything. It just makes things really get messy fast. But again, this was an early game and they didn't have a lot to go off of as far as like these tactical level games until like Squad Leader came out. And I mean, Squad Leader solved a lot of these problems. Actually, Panzer Leader solved a lot of these problems. But again, I want to keep this a Panzerblitz game, so that's why I do it. Okay, Germans can take off stuff. Let's do that. Remove my fired. Okay, Ruskies go. Soviets are going. This guy's going to fire. That guys can move. These guys. Can't really do much here. 1 to 5 odds aren't going to do enough. I could. Nothing to say I can't fire somebody else, though. We can fire right down here. I think I can lob a shell over. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to go a 9 to 5. Two to 1-to-1 odds. And I get a 5, so nothing. Okay, I did it. Nothing happened. Now we can do our moves. Can't move a dispersed unit. So I just got to stay put there. This guy's going to do a close... These guys will do a close combat. Close combat there, and there. And these guys, before I move, I can move. This guy can make a fire. 3 to 3, 1-to-1 odds. So we'll take it. 1-to-1 with a 1 is going to be a DD. Okay. Oh, 1-to-1, that would be a 2. It's still a D because this guy's he's in town. I forget he's in town. So, okay, this guy fired. Okay, now we can take our moves. I'll just move that guy there. Just get him out of the way. 1, 2, and I'm going to attack here, this dispersed unit. These, and then the rest of these guys are going to attack here. Okay, so I've got 8, 16, and 20 is 36 to 40, so 1-to-2 odds. -2. Ooh, 1-to-2. And I got a 1. So -2 is an X. Oh, ouch. Okay. So this guy goes to graveyard. He goes to graveyard. And then he is replaced by a blockage right here. There's a block. Okay. I want to show. I don't. This will let me take it to the graveyard. Let me see. Hey, it did. All right. Okay. And let's see, did I move the turn marker? I can't remember if I moved the turn marker or not. Oh well, we'll call it 8. Those guys moved, and then this guy 10 to 3. I'm going to go this 3-to-1 -2. Wait, he was here. He's going to move here. He can't go that. I just realized if he went 1, 2, he can't charge. He has to be here to charge, so he's stuck. Okay, now I can take off dispersed, 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 and fired. Everything, clean up everything. Okay, and that's it. Okay, now the Germans get to go. Like I say, a lot of errors in this game, but it's good to get the idea of what's going on here. Okay, German turn. I'm going to move. This guy's got a pretty good, he's got a pretty good fight left in him. Or I could pull here and pull that guy out. Or I could pull back, which is a good thing to do. I don't have a lot of... I think I'm going to pull back to a defensive position here. Actually, I can move here. And... I don't know. This guy's really stuck. I'm going to attack here. I'm going to do a close combat attack here and just eliminate this guy. Because he gets 4-to-1 odds. Well, would that eliminate him? That's a question. Let's see. Wait, bring him back. Okay. He's got 1, right? Here I've got 10 or 5. But they're halved, so that's 2-to-1 odds. But the engineer's with him, so that's 3-to-1. I guess 3-to-1 odds, -2. I get a 1. Okay, so it did all that finagling, and I just got him. Okay, now this guy here is going to go, and he's got 4, and I got 6 here. So 6 and 4 is 10 to 8, 1 to 1, minus 2. Oh, 1 to 1 minus 2. That's an X, I think. 1 to 1 minus 2. Yep, X. Okay. Graveyard. This is a bloody little battle. Okay, and then that takes us to turn 9. We're almost here. Okay. This guy can shoot. This guy can shoot. This guy can shoot. And this guy can shoot. Okay. Oh, and this guy's not dispersed anymore. Okay, let's start down here. 2, 5. We'll say 5 to 3. And we'll check our weapons effectiveness. That's nothing there. And they're in town, so 5 to 3 plus 1. 1 to 1 plus 1, 5, 6. Nothing. Okay. Fired and fired. And then we've got these guys here, 12, 24. But they're up against infantry, so that's 12. Oh, 24 and 7. Is 31 to 15. 2 to 1 odds. Okay, 2 to 1. Hold on. Let's do, okay, 12, 24, and 7 is 31. Divided by 2 is going to be 15 to 15. So 1 to 1 odds. With a 6. Nothing. Okay. Now we can make our moves. He's not going to do anything there. He's fired. Okay. Here, these guys are going to go against him. These guys will do a close assault. They'll move. Whoop. Got to move those infantry somehow. Okay, close assault. And here we've got close assault against this guy here, this infantry. So we've got 10, 20, 30. So 5 to 1, that's going to be an elimination. Oh, 5 to 1. Actually, it's 4 to 1, and they get a +1. If they get a 3, yeah, okay, that's elimination. I was going to say if you look on the chart here, if they would have rolled a 6, that would have been a 7, and it would have been nothing. So you can actually make it, but nope, no luck. Okay, and then here we've got an 8, 8 to 10, 1 to 2. +1 with a 1, 2. What's a 1 to 2 plus 2? That's a dispersal. Okay, and that's the end of the Soviet turn. They've done everything they can. Germans get to go. We'll start by, I always forget these guys can fire. So we're going to go 4 and 8. 8 to 2, 4 to 1. That's an elimination. Is there a modifier? H to M. Nope, that's no modifier. So yeah, that's to the graveyard. Okay, now here I have an 8 to 8. And that's actually a 4 to 8, so it's a 1 to 2. It's on the bottom here. Um, 1 to 2 with the 5 is nothing. Okay, and then we're going to make our little attacks here. Okay, this is the crazy one. 3 and 2 is a 5. And they're halved. So 5 to 2 to 3, 1 to 2 odds, but I move it over because of the engineer. 1 to 1 minus 2 with a 2 is a 0. 1 to 1 with a 0 is a DD. Okay, so he's dispersed. And then this guy's a 3 to 8. 1 to 3, but you shift it. So 1 to 3, 1 to 2 minus 2 is a 0. 1 to 2, 0 is a DD, so he's dispersed. And that ends the German turn. Okay. Last turn of the game. And like I say, this is not beautiful, but it's functional. If you guys are interested, let me know down below, and I will keep this series up. I know some people will probably be so disgusted watching me play this badly that they'll never want to see it again. But if you do think this is something you'd like to keep seeing me play a scenario every couple weeks, I'll be glad to. Also, I think I'll probably go into more of the optional rules and start putting some errata in the rules. But and then maybe talk about also in every video talk about a piece of weaponry or trucks or whatever. Just give a little short thing on that. I might do another one of these and see how it goes, and if nobody shows much interest, I'll probably stop. But otherwise, I'll just keep cranking these out, a couple of these out up every month. So again, let me know down below. That would help. And again, for everybody that watches this, I really do appreciate this. I really do. Okay, let's start with our artillery. I guess we'll still try to do these guys. Fired and fired. And that's going to be 12 to, let's just take this guy. We're going to do it 2 to 1 odds with a 4. Okay, at least I got a dispersal out of one guy here. And then movements. This guy's going to move. These guys will move. I forgot that guy firing, but that's okay. He's not. It's pretty hard. That's going to be a pretty hard thing to fire, so we'll just keep going. And then close assaults are going to be 16 and 20. 36 to 10, so 3 to 1 odds. And then that's going to be 3 to 1 minus 2 plus 1, so 3 to 1 minus 1. I got a 1. Oh, 3 to 1 minus 1 is okay. Well, to the graveyard. And that ends the Soviet turn. Okay, the Germans get to go. Not much I can do here. This is going to be 1 to 2. Actually, 1 to 1 minus 2. 1 to 1 minus 2. 0. Okay. It's a DD. He's dispersed. And then right here, oh, that was a charge. That was a CR. That was a close combat. Here, let's do this. First of all, I'll fire. And that's going to be an 8 to 8, a 1 to 1. Half, it's 1 to 2. With a 6, nothing. Okay, and then finally, this guy's going to go 3 to 8. 1 to 3 odds. He's an engineer, so that makes it 1 to 2 minus 2. But he's in woods, so 1 to 2 minus 1 is a 4. 3, nothing. Okay, and that ends the game. Okay, units lost. This, like I said, this was bloody. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14 units that the Germans lost. So, That's 12 or more units. That's a tactical victory. And then the Russians lost 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And oh, 7 Germans. So marginal. That is hard to read. Okay, victory conditions, marginal. 6 or 7 German units destroyed. Oh, okay. So Germans got a marginal victory over here, and then the Russians got a tactical. So I think the Russians won it. So, okay, that is Panzerblitz first scenario. I appreciate you guys watching. And I'll probably be doing a couple other games. I'll be busy this month with games, so there should be one coming out every weekend. And like I say, if you're interested in more Panzerblitz, let me know, and I will keep putting these out. And hopefully my play style and expertise with this game will improve as I do it. I think there's 12 games or 15 games. How many situations are there? There's 12 situations. So by the end of 12, I ought to have this baby down. Anyway, have a good one, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.